used to draw pictures of my imaginary friend when I was little. Last month, my grandmother saw my old sketchbook and asked me how I knew what her first husband looked like before he was murdered. When I was 6 years old, I had a friend named Benny who nobody else could see. He would sit at the edge of my bed every night and tell me stories about a farm with apple trees and a red barn, and a woman with braided hair who made the best cinnamon bread. My parents thought it was adorable at first. They would hear me talking in my room and peek through the door, smiling at each other like I was performing some cute little show. My mother even set an extra place at dinner once because I insisted Benny was hungry. They assumed I would grow out of it eventually, but I never really did. Benny stayed with me until I was almost 10 years old. He always looked the same, tall, thin, with calloused hands and a scar above his left eyebrow shaped like a crescent moon. I drew pictures of him constantly, filled entire sketchbooks with his face, his hands, the farm he described in such vivid detail. My parents took me to a child psychologist when I was 8. She said I had an overactive imagination and recommended I channel it into creative activities. My mother enrolled me in art classes. I kept drawing Benny. When I turned 10, he stopped coming. One night, he sat on my bed like always, but he looked sad. He told me I was old enough now to remember what he showed me. Then he said goodbye and I never saw him again. I forgot about Benny for almost 20 years. The sketchbooks got packed away in boxes during moves, buried under old clothes and forgotten toys. I grew up, went to college, got a job, and lived a normal life. The imaginary friend from my childhood became a distant, hazy memory. Then last month, my grandmother had a stroke. I flew home to help my mother clean out her house and prepare for assisted living. My grandmother was 86 years old and had lived alone since my grandfather died. The house was cluttered with decades of accumulated belongings. We spent days sorting through boxes, donating furniture, throwing away things that had no meaning to anyone anymore. On the third day, I found my old sketchbooks in the attic. I sat on the dusty floor and flipped through pages I hadn't seen in 2 decades. Drawings of Benny, the farm, the apple trees, the woman with braided hair, the red barn. My childhood handwriting labeled each picture with dates and descriptions. I brought one of the sketchbooks downstairs to show my mother. She barely glanced at it, too busy sorting through financial documents. But my grandmother was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, and she reached out a trembling hand. "Let me see that," she whispered. I handed her the sketchbook. She opened the first page and made a sound I will never forget. It was somewhere between a gasp and a moan, like something had been torn out of her chest. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was shaking. I told her I drew them when I was little. She kept turning pages, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. "This is Bernard," she said. "My first husband. He died 3 months after our marriage." I didn't understand. My grandmother had only ever been married to my grandfather, a man named Louis who died of a heart attack when I was 2. But she shook her head and told me the truth. Bernard was her first love. They married young and bought a small farm together. Apple orchard, red barn. She made cinnamon bread every Sunday morning. They were happy for almost 8 years. Then Bernard was killed. A man named Curtis Bowman owned the neighboring property and wanted to buy their land. Bernard refused to sell. One night, their barn caught fire. Bernard ran in to save the animals and never came out. The fire marshal ruled it an accident, but my grandmother knew better. She found an empty kerosene can hidden in the woods behind their property. She reported Curtis to the police. They investigated but found nothing. My grandmother remarried eventually. She had children and tried to move on, but she never forgot Bernard, and she never stopped believing Curtis got away with murder. I sat with her for hours that night. She told me about the scar above Bernard's eyebrow from a farming accident, the missing button he never fixed because he said it gave his shirt character, the brown boots he wore every single day. Every detail matched my drawings exactly. I don't know how to explain what happened to me as a child. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or spirits or messages from the dead, but I know that I spent 4 years drawing a man I had never met, describing a farm I had never seen, and somehow carrying a story that my grandmother had buried for decades. Curtis Bowman died 12 years ago. He was never charged with anything. But last week, I submitted my grandmother's testimony and my childhood drawings to a journalist who covers cold cases. She's reopening the investigation. Bernard's story is finally going to be told. Some things refuse to stay buried forever.